What happens when a woman whose voice helped define an entire genre walks into a room that believes it already knows her story? What happens when 5 decades of music, survival, loss, triumph, and truth collide with a table built for opinions instead of understanding? And what happens when a queen is invited to be celebrated, but instead finds herself quietly placed on trial? No one in the studio that morning knew they were about to witness one of the most emotionally charged moments in daytime television history. Not the producers adjusting their headsets. Not the audience members clutching coffee cups and programs. Not even the hosts themselves. Because this wasn't supposed to be a confrontation. It was supposed to be a coronation. The air inside the View studio carried that familiar, carefully controlled warmth, soft studio lights glowing just bright enough to feel welcoming, just dim enough to hide the cables and cameras snaking across the floor. The temperature sat perfectly balanced, neither hot nor cold, the kind of climate designed to keep guests comfortable and compliant. Audience chatter hummed low, a restless buzz of anticipation floating beneath the music playing softly through the speakers. Today was supposed to be special. Word had traveled quickly through the building, Chaka Khan was coming. Not just a guest. A legend. Makeup artists lingered longer than usual in the hallway. Young production assistants whispered her name with reverence, some of them too young to remember her chart-topping dominance firsthand but old enough to know they were in the presence of someone whose influence shaped the voices they listened to every day. 10 Grammy Awards. 50 years of music. A voice that could crack glass or cradle a soul. At 71 years old, Chaka Khan had nothing left to prove. And yet, she still walked into rooms like this one with her shoulders squared, not out of arrogance, but out of memory. Memory of every door she had to push open. Every room that hadn't been ready for a woman like her. When she arrived at the studio, she didn't rush. She never had. Her entrance wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. Her signature hair framed her face like a crown worn without effort. Her walk carried the calm assurance of someone who had already survived everything people tried to use against her. She smiled at the staff. Stopped to speak to interns. Thanked a stagehand by name after glancing at his badge. It wasn't performative. It was habit. Chaka remembered what it felt like to be invisible. In the green room, the atmosphere shifted the moment she sat down. Conversations softened. Phones discreetly came out, not for photos, but for messages sent to friends and family. Chaka Khan is here. Her team reviewed the talking points with practiced ease. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Recent performances. New music. Legacy. Gratitude. Chaka listened, nodding, but her attention drifted. Not out of boredom, out of instinct. She felt rooms the way other people read scripts. She sensed energy. Tension. Curiosity. Threat. 50 years in the industry teaches you that celebration and judgment often wear the same smile. Meanwhile, just down the corridor, Joy Behar arrived with a very different energy. She took her seat early. Checked her notes. Made a quiet comment to a producer that didn't quite land as a joke. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were alert, sharp, already working. She had done this 1,000 times before. The audience would never know it, but Joy often decided the tone of her questions long before the cameras rolled. She believed it was her job to push, to challenge, to be the voice others wouldn't. Sometimes that worked. Sometimes it crossed a line. The hosts gathered at the table as the countdown began. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her glasses, glancing toward the stage entrance with genuine warmth. Sarah Haynes shifted in her chair, smiling, clearly excited. Sunny Hostin reviewed her cards, her expression thoughtful. Joy leaned back slightly, arms resting comfortably, lips pressed together in something that looked almost amused. The red light blinked on. And just like that, millions of living rooms fell silent. The applause started the moment Chaka Khan appeared. Not polite applause. Not routine applause. A standing ovation. It rolled through the studio like a wave, rising, growing, lasting far longer than the producers had planned. People clapped above their heads. Some shouted her name. Others simply stood there, smiling, overwhelmed by the presence of a woman whose voice had soundtracked their lives. Chaka paused. She always did. She let the applause breathe. Let it exist. Let people have their moment with her, and her moment with them. Then she placed a hand over her heart, bowed her head slightly, and smiled with a softness that felt almost intimate. "Thank you so much, babies," she said as she took her seat. "I feel the love in this room." The words weren't scripted. They never were. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice filled with genuine reverence. "Our next guest is a true living legend. 10 Grammy Awards. A career that spans 5 decades. A voice that helped shape the sound of modern music. Please welcome the incomparable Chaka Khan." More applause. Chaka laughed lightly, that unmistakable warmth threading through her voice. "Y'all gonna make me cry already." For a moment, everything was exactly as it should have been. Sarah asked about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, and Chaka answered thoughtfully, speaking about the long road from Chicago's South Side to global stages. She talked about Rufus. About recording music before anyone knew what an algorithm was. About singing because it felt necessary, not because it was profitable. "We weren't thinking about history," she said gently. "We were just trying to be real." The audience leaned in. This was the Chaka Khan they came to see. Humble. Reflective. Grateful. Sunny nodded as Chaka spoke about being overlooked, about watching peers be inducted years earlier, about learning patience in an industry that rarely rewarded women who didn't fit neatly into boxes. "And now," Chaka said, smiling softly, "to finally be recognized alongside artists who changed my life, it's overwhelming. In the best way." Applause rippled again. And then, Joy leaned forward. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just enough to shift the energy. "So, Chaka," Joy began, her tone lighter than her words, "you talk about recognition and legacy." There was a pause. A small one. Almost unnoticeable. "But your career hasn't exactly been smooth, has it?" The room changed. Not loudly. Not immediately. But something tightened. Chaka turned her head slightly toward Joy, her expression calm, attentive. Joy continued. "The struggles. The drugs. The rehab. The years when you disappeared from the spotlight." She tilted her head, lips pursed. "Do you ever wonder if this Hall of Fame moment is more about nostalgia than actual achievement?" The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was heavy. You could feel it press down on the studio, flattening the warmth that had filled the room just seconds earlier. A few audience members shifted in their seats. Someone coughed, then quickly stopped. Sarah's smile faded. Sunny's eyes narrowed. Whoopi didn't move, but her jaw tightened. Chaka didn't react right away. She inhaled slowly. Deeply. The kind of breath taken by someone who has been here before. Someone who knows that how you respond matters more than what you're responding to. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "Joy," she said calmly, "I've never hidden from my past." The audience waited. "I've been open about my struggles. Addiction is part of my story, but it is not my definition." Joy nodded slightly, but her eyes stayed fixed. "What defines my career," Chaka continued, "is the music. The impact. The people whose lives were changed because of what I created." There was a quiet murmur of approval from the crowd. Joy didn't smile. "But your biggest hits," she pressed, "they were decades ago. I'm Every Woman. Ain't Nobody. That was the 70s. The 80s. What have you done lately that justifies this level of celebration?" This time, the discomfort was impossible to ignore. Someone in the audience audibly exhaled. Chaka's gaze didn't waver. "What have I done lately?" she repeated softly. She leaned forward just a little. "I've stayed alive." The words landed heavier than any raised voice could have. "I've toured the world. I've sold out venues on every continent. I've recorded new music. I've mentored younger artists who want to learn from someone who's actually lived this life." She paused. "And I've stayed sober. At 71 years old. A beat. That matters." Applause started, tentative at first, then stronger. Joy's expression tightened. "But let's talk about I'm Every Woman," she said quickly, cutting through the moment. That song became even more famous when Whitney Houston covered it. Some people say her version is the one that really counts. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Chaka's eyes flickered, not with anger, but with something deeper. Whitney's name wasn't just a reference. It was personal. And for the first time since the interview began, Chaka didn't answer immediately. She sat there, hands folded, eyes distant, as if a memory had just been opened that couldn't be closed. The audience felt it. Everyone did. And as Joy leaned back in her chair, waiting for a reaction, the studio hung suspended in that fragile, dangerous silence, the kind that comes right before something breaks. The silence after Whitney Houston's name wasn't accidental. It was instinctive. Everyone in the studio felt it, the audience, the hosts, even the camera operators who had learned over years of live television when to hold a shot just a fraction longer. This was no longer a casual conversation drifting off script. This was a fault line opening beneath the table. Chaka Khan sat perfectly still. Her face didn't harden. Her shoulders didn't tense. But something unmistakable shifted behind her eyes. Joy Behar watched closely, chin slightly raised, as if waiting for a stumble. The kind of stumble that turns headlines cruel. The kind of moment daytime television quietly feeds on. Instead, Chaka smiled. Not warmly. Not politely. It was the smile of someone who has already survived the worst thing you could possibly bring up. "Whitney was my sister," Chaka said softly. The way she said it, was, not is, sent a quiet ripple through the audience. Someone near the front row pressed their lips together, nodding unconsciously. "I loved her," Chaka continued. "And I still do." Joy didn't interrupt this time, but her pen tapped lightly against her card. "Yes," Chaka said, lifting her chin slightly, "Whitney's version was beautiful. Powerful. And it introduced that song to a whole new generation." She leaned forward now, just a few inches, but the effect was magnetic. "But let me tell you something about that song," she said, her voice gaining weight. "I recorded I'm Every Woman in 1978. It was written for women who didn't see themselves reflected anywhere. It wasn't about charts. It was about identity." The audience leaned in. "When Whitney sang it 15 years later, she didn't erase me," Chaka said. "She extended the song's life. That's not being overshadowed." She paused. "That's called legacy." Applause broke out, stronger now, less restrained. Joy smiled thinly. "But don't you think," she pressed, "that a lot of people remember the chaos just as much as the music? The missed performances. The erratic behavior. The years when the drugs clearly took their toll." The word chaos hung in the air like smoke. Sunny Hostin shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah Haynes glanced toward Whoopi, who remained still but alert, eyes fixed on Chaka with quiet concern. Chaka didn't look at the audience this time. She looked directly at Joy. "Chaos," she repeated slowly. Her voice didn't rise. That somehow made it more dangerous. "You want to talk about chaos, Joy?" She took a breath, not shaky, not emotional, but deliberate. The kind of breath someone takes before telling the truth without cushioning. It Chaos is growing up black and female in America in the 1960s, she said. Chaos is being told your voice is too loud, too strong, too much. Chaos is walking into studios where no one looked like you and being expected to shrink. Joy opened her mouth to interject, but Chaka didn't stop. Chaos is watching friends die from the same disease that almost killed you, Chaka said, her voice tightening just slightly now. Chaos is fighting addiction in public, while other people get to destroy themselves in private. The audience was completely silent. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Chaos, Chaka continued, is standing on a stage night after night, singing joy into a world that keeps trying to break you. She leaned back, finally breaking eye contact. That was my chaos. Joy cleared her throat. I'm just saying, she said, attempting a lighter tone, don't you ever wish you'd done things differently? That was the question. The one that always came eventually. The polite way of asking whether survival was worth the mess. Chaka's response didn't come immediately. She looked down at her hands, at the rings catching the studio light, each one earned through decades of work. When she looked up again, her eyes were steady, but something raw had surfaced beneath the calm. Every mistake I made, she said slowly, went into the music. She gestured lightly toward herself. You don't get this voice without the pain that shaped it. You don't get through the fire without having walked through it. A murmur moved through the crowd. Joy shook her head slightly. But surely you can admit your reputation suffered. That people remember the difficult moments just as much as the achievements. That was when Chaka laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't amused. It was sharp. Brief. Final. Overshadowed my achievements, she said. She sat up straighter. I have 10 Grammy Awards. A beat. 10. The number echoed. I've sold millions of records worldwide. I've influenced artists from Beyoncé to Adele to Mary J. Blige. Every woman singing R&B today owes something to what I helped build. Joy shifted in her chair. That doesn't get overshadowed, Chaka said. That outlives. And then, slowly, deliberately, Chaka stood. Gasps rippled through the audience. Standing up on the view wasn't dramatic by default. But this was different. The movement wasn't impulsive. It was controlled. Commanding. Her presence filled the studio in a way cameras couldn't quite capture. You know what I think this really is, Joy? Chaka said, her voice rising, not in volume, but in intensity. I think you don't understand artists. Joy stiffened. I think you don't understand what it costs to bare your soul for strangers year after year. To turn pain into something beautiful and then let people pick it apart. She took a step forward, not aggressive, but intentional. You sit at this table and judge lives you've never lived. Art you've never created. Struggles you've never had to survive. The audience erupted into applause, some people standing without realizing it. Joy opened her mouth to respond. Chaka raised a hand, not threatening, just final. I'm not finished. The room froze. Yes, I struggled, Chaka said. I went to rehab. I did the work. I got clean. Yes, I loved and lost. Yes, I fought for myself in an industry that wanted me quiet and grateful. She pointed gently toward herself. But through all of it, I kept singing. She turned toward the audience now. And to every woman watching who's been reduced to her worst moment, hear me when I say this, your struggles are not your shame. Applause thundered. They are your strength. Chaka turned back to Joy, her expression no longer angry, but deeply disappointed. The people who try to diminish you, she said softly, are usually running from something in themselves. Joy sat frozen. For a moment, it looked like she might laugh it off. Make a joke. Deflect. Instead, she said nothing. The silence stretched. And in that silence, something irreversible settled over the studio. Because everyone realized the truth at the same time, this interview was no longer recoverable. And Chaka Khan wasn't done yet. She took one slow breath, her voice dropping, sharpening. "I came here to celebrate being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame," she said. "Instead, I've spent this time defending my entire existence." She straightened her jacket. "Well, I'm not ashamed." The audience stood now, fully, instinctively. "I'm proud," Chaka said. "Of every song. Every scar. Every moment I survived." She looked directly at Joy. "And when I leave this studio tonight, I'm going to step onto a stage and sing for people who love me. Who healed with my music." Her voice lowered. "What will you leave behind, Joy?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. And just as Joy finally leaned forward, clearly preparing to answer, Chaka took a step away from the table. The audience gasped. The host stared. The cameras scrambled to adjust. Because it suddenly looked like Chaka Khan was about to do the unthinkable. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. The studio, so carefully engineered for controlled conversation, felt suddenly fragile, like glass stretched too thin. The applause that had risen moments earlier faded into a stunned hush as Chaka Khan stepped away from the table. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Measured. Intentional. The kind of movement that tells everyone watching, this moment has already been decided. Joy Behar finally leaned forward, her mouth opening as if to reclaim control of the segment, to pull the conversation back from the edge. Years of television instinct kicked in, fill the silence, soften the blow, regain narrative balance. But Chaka didn't look back. She stood fully now, her silhouette framed by the studio lights, which suddenly felt harsher, brighter, exposing everything. The cameras adjusted instinctively, one tightening in on her face, another catching Joy frozen at the table, smaller than she'd been at the start of the hour. Chaka turned, not toward Joy, but toward the audience. Her voice softened. Not weakened. Deepened. "I want to thank everyone who has supported my music over the years," she said. "You are the reason I'm still here." A few audience members wiped at their eyes. "You're the reason I fought for my life. You're the reason I got clean. You're the reason I keep singing even when my body tells me to rest." She placed a hand over her heart. "I do it for you. And I do it for the little girl from Chicago who dreamed of being heard." Her lips curved into a smile, gentle, proud, unbreakable. "She made it," Chaka said. "We made it." The audience rose as one. Not prompted. Not encouraged. A full standing ovation thundered through the studio, echoing off the walls, rattling the cameras, drowning out everything else. This wasn't applause for a performance. It was recognition. Chaka turned slightly, as if to leave, then stopped. Slowly, deliberately, she looked back at Joy. "One more thing," she said. The room went still again. Through the fire, Chaka continued, her voice calm but razor-sharp, wasn't just a song. It was a promise. About surviving the worst life can throw at you and coming out the other side still standing. She met Joy's eyes. "I've been through the fire many times," she said. "And I'm still here. Still singing. Still living out loud." A pause. "Maybe someday," Chaka added, "you'll understand what that means." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. She didn't need to. "Maybe someday," she finished quietly, "you'll have the courage to walk through your own fire instead of watching other people burn from the safety of your chair." That was it. Chaka Khan turned and walked off the stage. Not in anger. Not in triumph. In dignity. The applause followed her all the way to the wings, swelling louder, longer, refusing to fade. Some audience members were crying openly now. Others simply stood, hands aching, unwilling to stop clapping for a woman who had just shown them what strength really looked like. At the table, the remaining hosts sat frozen. Whoopi Goldberg stared ahead, her expression tight, not surprised, but deeply disappointed. She'd seen this before. Not the walk-off, but the pattern. The line between challenge and cruelty crossed too casually. Sarah Haynes blinked rapidly, visibly emotional, her hands clasped together as if trying to steady herself. Sunny Hostin exhaled slowly, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. And Joy Behar, Joy sat very still. Her shoulders, once relaxed, now sloped slightly inward. The confidence that usually filled her posture had drained away, replaced by something unfamiliar. Smallness. For the first time that morning, she looked unsure of what to say. The cameras lingered just a moment too long. Then the show cut to commercial. But the moment didn't end there. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation began spreading online. Short excerpts at first, Chaka's words about legacy, about survival, about staying alive. Then longer cuts. Then full uploads. By the end of the day, millions had watched. By the end of the week, everyone had an opinion. Entertainment news called it explosive. Social media called it long overdue. Fans called it justice. Streams of Chaka Khan's music surged overnight. Younger listeners discovered her for the first time, not as a nostalgic name, but as a living force. Older fans revisited the songs that had carried them through heartbreak, celebration, survival. And the question echoed everywhere: why are we so eager to judge people for the very struggles that made them who they are? Because what unfolded that morning wasn't just about an interview gone wrong. It was about legacy. Chaka Khan didn't build hers by being flawless. She built it by being real. By falling. By getting back up. By turning pain into power and sharing it with the world. She didn't just wear the crown. She earned it. And in a room designed to reduce lives to soundbites, she reminded everyone watching that a life fully lived, with all its mess, mistakes, and miracles, is worth infinitely more than a life spent safely judging others from the sidelines. That's what legends do. They don't just survive the fire. They teach the world how to walk through it. If this story moved you, drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she just doing her job? Like the video if you believe real legacy is earned, not sanitized. Subscribe for more cinematic stories that reveal what really happens behind the cameras. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their struggles don't erase their worth, they prove it. Because queens don't ask for respect. They command it.